medic by trade. I've got 25 years NHS experience. I've been a surgical oncologist. I've been an academic molecular oncologist. I retrained as a GP. My interest in longevity medicine really stems from I am of an age. I've always liked cellular biology, and longevity medicine is an upcoming area. It's really accelerating in terms of its academic research and the concept of health span. We know people are living longer, but what medicine has been really poor at in the UK particularly is ensuring that those lives are high quality lives, that those years lived have value. Medicine hasn't really thought about that. And that for me is one of the ethical drivers of the longevity medicine, and the phraseology around it is health span, not lifespan. How long we live shouldn't be the primary driver. It's how healthily we can continue to live. We know from recent research that age isn't a linear accrual of stuff. There's probably a marked decline at about 44. So that's probably the middle-age noises onset. My son until recently just said, geez, can you not get up or sit down without making a noise? And you start to think, why have I started doing that? And then there's another cliff edge somewhere in the early 60s, and they probably represent an accrual of physiological change that crosses a threshold, and then another one. And it doesn't have to be like that. I joined Brave Starts because I was changing career. Life's complex, takes 40 or 50 years to even begin to understand it, and we can do stuff to try and stop that physiological decline. And if you've got another 40 years of health, if we can keep you at that sort of peri-50 fitness level for another 30 years, what are you going to do? And that's what triggered my passion for this. The good news is there's a ton of evidence-based, well, not easy to do, but stuff you can do, okay? So the pillars around healthy aging, longevity, and health span really boil down to some quite simple stuff. So nutrition is absolutely key. Sleep is absolutely key. Physical exercise is absolutely key. And we have probably overemphasized cardio for donkey's years. It's about strength. It's about putting muscle mass on. You cross 45, you lose 1%-ish of your muscle mass every year. You'll get to a point where you've got the medical diagnosis of sarcopenia. It's associated with falls risk, neurodegenerative risk. So those are the sort of fundamental pillars that we can all tackle. Then there's the cellular medicine component. This is where it gets really complicated. But if you imagine every cell in your body as a laptop, okay? Without a battery, that cell doesn't do anything. The cell contains structures called mitochondria, which are effectively batteries for the cell, in simple terms. That battery starts to not charge as well, just like the old laptops, over time. And that's probably one of the key drivers of what we call cell senescence, cell aging. The cells don't repair themselves properly. We end up with dysregulated inflammation. We end up with aches and pains. We end up with losing muscle mass. So anything we can do that puts that charge back into the mitochondria is a really key thing. And again, the good news here is we're not resorting to highfalutin medicines that, Eli Lilly will charge 200 billion globally for. There are some simple nutrition-based things or supplement-based things that we can all do. So pragmatically, what do we need to do? Well, if you can do resistance training 3 times a week, doesn't have to be every day. Even recent evidence says if you are a weekend warrior, so you hammer it on the 2 days spare that you might have, you can generate the benefits. But it's got to be predominantly resistance training. Lift or move something that doesn't want to be lifted or moved. Thing one. On the nutrition side, healthy, balanced diet. Consider a day or 2 a week of calorific restriction, because that promotes a process called autophagy, which is the cells hoovering up the stuff inside that doesn't work. Try and get the fruits and vegetables in. I know amongst us this evening we have an expert on pragmatic, excellent nutrition, and the key messages are largely unchanged. So we can all do that. The supplement bit I'm going to include in nutrition. So these are the things where there is a reasonable evidence base that it improves mitochondrial function. So there's a supplement called NMN, which is helpful in what's called the electron chain. So this is the charge in the mitochondria, basically. Coenzyme Q10 equally has a role in recharging mitochondria.
What was that second one? Sorry, Peter.
Coenzyme Q10.
Is that something that you buy on a shelf? Like, is it a box of something?
So CoQ10 is in Holland and Barrett. It's on Amazon. NMN, there are a number of providers in Europe, and I tend to stick with European providers because you're more assured of the quality chain, and there's a very good UK provider. There is also curcumin, which some of you may have heard of. Now, certain components within curcumin have been shown to help regulate what's called sterile background inflammation. As we age, our immune system becomes dysregulated, and it starts to, if you imagine, turn itself on when there's nothing to fight. So this is called sterile background inflammation. There's increasing evidence that this drives an awful lot of age-related disease processes, heart disease, neurodegenerative disease, particularly being two of them. It may have a role in cancer. Certain curcumin components have been shown to down-regulate sterile background inflammation. The sleep component is absolutely key. There's concrete evidence that you need 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep. And getting that in is really, really important. And avoiding things that destroy sleep, such as alcohol, is key in there. Sleep hygiene is key, particularly important for those of us who might work irregular hours, shift work. You know, this is fundamental. Doing any of that bag of stuff is going to have a measurable improvement. There are a variety of molecular clocks that we can use to measure physiological age or biological age versus chronological age. They've all been validated, and we know that this makes a difference. I know we've got a preponderance of ladies on the call, that one of the big things will be perimenopause and menopause. If you look at molecular clocks, there is a really big decline perimenopause in terms of biological age. The good news is that can be rectified with bioequivalent HRT and nutritional supplements and exercise. So that, you know, that is key. There is a company called GlycanAge, which measures something called the glycosome. The European Union's just invested several $100 million in them. Legitimate technology is my point. They have really good evidence that in ladies, you measure menopause, biological age increases markedly, i.e. you age faster, which fits with, you know, I'm a practicing GP, it fits with what women report. But if you correct that, feel better, your molecular clocks improve. So I think the key take-home message is longevity medicine is a really emerging field. I personally don't think it's ever really going to be offered on the NHS for a variety of complex reasons, but it's something that we can adopt to improve our own health autonomy, the looking after ourselves bit, the encouraging our recalcitrant other halves to perhaps take some supplements, get some good nutrition, think about resistance exercise. There is a whole chunk of what I'd call the hardcore medicine bit, which may be for another time. There's an entire armamentarium of effectively prescription-only stuff which will improve longevity. And what have I bought into? Well, personally, with my own money, I use NMN, and I'm not joking. After 4 weeks, my son made the observation that mum and dad don't make middle-aged noises any longer. I feel better. My wife, who's a GP dermatologist, is convinced her skin looks better. We feel better. So I think NMN is a good one. I take curcumin and I take CoQ10 at the moment. So I think these are things that we should all be doing. One of my missions is to divide ages by decades and work out what is the optimum kind of combination of supplements. Not that it changes a huge amount, but there's some tweaks that we can do. And I think it's really important that we look after ourselves for a variety of reasons. Our parents are aging physically longer or chronologically longer than they ever used to, but they've missed the health span revolution. And that doesn't mean all is lost. I encourage my mum and dad to take N because there's no reason not to. There's an interesting paper the other day suggesting that creatine, so the supplement that many of you might associate with bodybuilders, 5 grams a day seems to be protective against neurodegenerative disease. And that probably would be my personal next step in terms of the supplement stuff. So all of this is evidence-based. None of this is quackery. I can pull the papers. And in the longevity medicine communities, for the medically qualified, these things are staples. You know, this isn't the rocket science. This is the core stuff. Exercise, nutrition, sleep, core supplements. We can do those. We don't necessarily need a doctor to help and guide us with it. You know, and I'd love more people to be taking care of themselves. I'd love to see what folk who've got that complex experience of life, if they can maintain that physiological life, what do you do next? Where's your next success? What's your next challenge? Where's your next business? Enjoy picking the grandkids up like they're nothing when you're 75. Those are now reasonable goals by implementing the changes somewhere between 40 onwards. And it's never too late to start, it would appear.
Okay.
You know, that's the key bit. And whilst we'd all like to make the atomic changes and do it every day, it's not something to get stressed over every day. Make what changes you can and persist as well as you can, and you will get some net benefit. You don't have to do the Brian Johnson level of crazy to optimize your own personal health span. And I think that's really important. So that's my quick soapbox.
It's brilliant. I mean, you nailed all 3 answers pretty much off the bat. I'm probably going to need to ask you to make some notes to help us out after it, because I don't know if I've accurately caught coenzyme, QN, curcumin, MNN, and all these sorts of things. I mean, a couple of quick questions for me. What level of difference are we talking about? And I do suspect, I mean, you've kind of sort of said nutrition. I suspect there's probably an entire session that we could run on that alone. But I mean, on the nutrition angle, is there anything that you can kind of elaborate further? Are there any kind of, you know, do we know, for example, we always hear sugar is a really bad thing. You know, should we all be avoiding sugar? Have you got any kind of like more tips on the nutrition side?
I think essentially it's all things in moderation, but avoid, you know, the really ultra processed. Ultra processed is a bad term because it covers stuff that isn't, so it's really tricky. So it's not about avoiding anything totally, it's about eating sensibly and in balance. Try to get the fresh fruit and vegetables in, try to get high quality protein in. We know we need more protein than anybody thinks. Yeah. So it really is the fundamentals of eating healthy. And you know, that's the key bit. The moderation bit also relates to the amount of calories you ingest. We know robustly that having 1 or 2 days a week with significant calorie restriction promotes this cellular process called autophagy. So the old 5-2 diet might have been doing more benefit than simply losing weight, because it seems to improve the cellular senescence processes. You can mimic that with some drugs, but it's a bit easier just to consider that as a strategy if you wish to.
Yeah. And so I get my head around that. So you're restricting your diet 2 days a week. So you're basically just eating a lot less and you're being a lot more hungry. Yeah. And by being hungry, what your body's basically digesting is all the leftover rubbish that doesn't normally get digested in the week. Is that right?
No. So this is about a cellular process. So appetite is a really complex process, and obesity is actually a really complex process. By putting the body into a transient state of starvation, signaling molecules push cells into doing a cleanup. So if those of us remember the old days with a computer, you had to defrag the hard drive, you had to run the updates. That's what the cell's doing. And for some reason, it does it when it's triggered by a period of relative starvation. And it's to do with complex signaling cascades within the body. So it's a cellular process, but it's definitely triggered by caloric restriction. A lot of the top US longevity medics themselves do some variety of caloric restriction. rather than take the pills and supplements that are thought to promote it.
Interesting. And when you say calorie restriction, what does that mean? 1 meal on those days, 2 meals, but just
You
really
probably need to be under 500 calories a day for it to kick in.
Oh, oh my
So
God! I'd rather just
it,
drink the alcohol and have the coffee.
you know, it's
2 less years.
it's a choice. I think the impression I get, I don't do it, as you might be able to tell, but the guys that and the team that do it, they do integrate it, and they tell me it doesn't feel as bad once you've been doing it for a while, because it starts to become your normal physiology, and the hunger appetite piece is really complex. There is far more going on there than we've initially thought about. If you don't want to do it, there is a supplement derived from mushrooms called spermidine, which stimulates the same process. Now, that's quite an expensive supplement. The ones I've mentioned are relatively low cost. Spermidine's relatively expensive, but it certainly does promote autophagy. So there is a cheat.
Okay. Yes, I like cheats. Spermidine. All right, writing this one down. Does that, just to be clear, if I have the spermidine, does that mean I can still eat chocolate?
It's not about denial, Lucy. It's about...
Oh, don't worry. You don't need to tell me.